The train hissed and clanked, then fell into an unnatural silence as it rolled away, leaving a cloud of dust behind and one woman standing alone beside her single suitcase. Clara Whitmore's hands were raw from the journey, her dress plain but clean, her back straight despite the iron brace around her left leg. She stood still as a fence post while townsfolk passed her by with glances that felt like judgment. No greetings, no welcome. Only sun and grit and quiet whispers. She had memorized the face of the man who wrote her, Jed Farnell, a rancher, 35, unmarried, a God-fearing man, he said. He'd promised a better life, said her limp didn't matter, said he wanted someone kind, quiet, and willing. He was standing right there, leaning against a rail, post by the saloon, a cigar hanging from his mouth. He looked at her once, her brace clanked as she shifted, his eyes paused on it. And then he spat on the ground, turned and walked away. No words. Clara didn't cry. She didn't chase him, she didn't beg. She simply stood there while the wind tugged at the hem of her skirt and her dreams crumbled like sandstone. After a while, a young boy with a bent hat wandered close and offered her a half-eaten apple. "He ain't coming back," he said without malice. She nodded and took the apple. That night, she slept in the train depot, curled against the wall with her back to the door and one hand resting on the small iron knife she kept wrapped in cloth inside her bag. She didn't eat. She didn't sleep much either. The station master didn't ask questions. He'd seen others like her, women with nowhere left to go and no one coming for them. She heard a cough in the dark before sunrise. Slow, deliberate footsteps tapped across the wooden floor. Not lawman's boots, not a drunk's, just slow, steady, weight-shifting steps. She stayed still. "You the bride left behind?" came a dry voice. Gravel low, tired, old but not frail. She turned her head. The man stood near the stove, pouring himself a cup of stale coffee. His coat was worn, dusty, long as a preacher's shadow. His left leg dragged slightly and his right hand was missing the last two fingers. Scars traced his neck like old lightning strikes. He didn't look at her. "You have a name?" he asked, sipping. "Clara," she said, voice thin. "You got anyone else in the world?" She shook her head. "Good. That makes this easier." He didn't offer comfort. He didn't offer lies. Just a choice. "I got a place outside town. It's cold. It's rough. But it's mine. You'll have a roof, a bed, and work. You'll earn your food. You won't owe me anything, and I won't owe you." "Fair enough." "Why?" she asked. He took another sip. "Because I don't like wasting things that can still fight." She stood slowly, tested her leg, picked up her bag. Didn't thank him. He didn't expect it. The ride out was quiet. The land stretched wide and empty, and Clara stared at it like a foreign country. The wind here didn't ask questions. The birds didn't sing. The soil looked dry enough to crack. He didn't offer his name, not yet, just pointed once toward a black ridge in the distance. "That's where we're going," he said. "Hope your spine's made of steel." The ranch wasn't a house. It was a fortress made of memory and half-rotten wood. One barn half collapsed, another full of old saddles and older regrets. Main house that groaned when the wind passed through it. 2 horses, 3 chickens, 1 porch swing that moved even when no one touched it. Clara unpacked in a room with no curtains. The mattress was thin, the floor cold. She didn't complain. She swept. She fixed what she could. She cooked what little they had. The man watched, always from a distance. He never corrected her, never praised her either. When she asked where to wash, he pointed to a rain barrel and said, "Don't catch pneumonia." She found a rhythm in silence, in broken things. He finally told her his name over boiled beans and cornbread on the 5th night. Eli Maddox, he said. Used to be someone, ain't anymore. She didn't press. The days turned colder. They rode fence lines together. He handed her a pistol once and said, "Coyote's been sniffing around." She didn't hesitate, took it, checked it, didn't tremble. That earned a glance from him. Not respect, not surprise, just acknowledgement. One night, a storm rolled in, hard and mean. The roof leaked in her room. She woke up to find a bucket already set under the drip. He never said he did it. She never asked. He never looked at her brace when she worked, never spoke of it, never tried to help when she stumbled on icy steps. He let her fall once, hard, then offered a hand and said nothing. She took it. Neither of them spoke of the bruise. Winter bled into the walls, and so did memories. Clara found a photo under a loose floorboard. A woman with bright eyes. A boy with messy hair. Eli, younger, cleaner, smiling. She left it where she found it. One afternoon, while chopping kindling, she caught him watching her. Not in pity, in recognition. She held the axe like it belonged in her hand, even when her leg buckled slightly with each swing. He didn't offer to take over. At supper, he finally said it. "You're not what I expected." She looked up. "What did you expect?" "Someone waiting to be saved." She chewed slow. "I'm not waiting." "No," he said. "You're not." Later that week, she heard him coughing into blood-soaked rags. He burned them before sunrise. She never said a word, just boiled more water for tea. A month passed, then 2. The town forgot about her. Jed Farnell didn't come back. No one came looking. That suited her just fine. But some nights, when the wind screamed loud enough to wake the dead, she'd sit on the porch and stare at the stars, wondering if all this, the broken man, the dead land, the empty rooms, was better than the promise she'd lost. And each time she asked that, she'd glance over and see Eli standing in the doorway, arms crossed, watching the sky like it owed him something. He never said anything. He just stood there. And for the first time in years, Clara wasn't afraid to be seen. The sound of hooves echoed before she saw him again. He rode in without warning, without a smile, and didn't bother to introduce himself a second time. Eli Maddox, the man who didn't blink when others looked away. He dismounted with a grunt and handed her a bundle of cloth, salt, beans, a dented tin of peaches. "Store didn't have much," he muttered, walking past her like the conversation didn't need her voice. It didn't. Clara had learned not to fill silences with useless words. She thanked him anyway, softly. He nodded once and sat on the porch like it was a throne he didn't ask for. He stared into the horizon. She went back to peeling potatoes. She didn't know what made him come back that day. He'd been gone a full week. When he left, he said nothing, no reason, no destination. Just rode off at dawn while she fed the chickens. When she asked the next evening where he'd been, he answered without looking up. Burying a memory. That was it. They spoke in short bursts after that. Truth wasn't a thing you passed around easily. It was earned, like heat from a slow fire. Days blurred into tasks. He fixed the door hinge. She stitched the curtains. He taught her how to ride. Bareback, slow and steady. Her brace didn't allow much speed, but she kept her posture straight and never fell once. She noticed how he watched her. Not the limp, not the cane, but her hands, her grit, her balance. He had an old mule named Harrow, stubborn as dried blood. The beast only listened to Eli and only kicked at everyone else. Until Clara. She fed. It apples from the tree behind the barn, and once leaned in, whispering nonsense to its ear. The next morning, Harrow let her brush his coat without protest. Eli just raised an eyebrow. She didn't explain. Neither did he. Their meals became less about hunger and more about habit. They sat across the table like reluctant ghosts. He never said grace. She always did, In her head, words she hadn't spoken aloud since Missouri. She asked one evening, what happened to the woman in the picture? He didn't flinch, just said her name was Eleanor. She liked lavender soap and hated thunder. What happened? Dead, her and my boy, shot in the back while I was out hunting men who owed me land. He didn't elaborate. She didn't push. That was the first time he finished his food in silence and walked out without a word. Clara slept, with the knife under her pillow even now, but not because she feared Eli. It was the quiet that scared her more, the kind of quiet that slips into your ribs and sits there, whispering old names. Then came the firewood incident. She slipped on ice behind the barn while hauling logs. Her knee twisted hard, her brace cracked. She bit her lip hard enough to bleed, but made no sound. When he found her crawling across the dirt like a soldier dragging herself from the battlefield, he said nothing at first. He just squatted beside her and lit a match. Then he fixed the brace with a piece of leather and a nail while she sat trembling. When he finished, he didn't lift her, just stood, nodded once, and walked away. The next morning, a new brace sat on her bed, handmade, fitted, sanded smooth. She didn't say thank you, but when he passed her that afternoon while she stirred stew, she muttered, "It fits. I measured while you were sleeping. You do that often?" "Only when I plan on building something." That night, she stayed awake longer than usual. The silence between them no longer felt sharp. It held weight, like old books on a shelf, waiting to be opened, but content to exist as they were. The cold settled deeper as January crept in. The wind howled louder, almost proud. One morning she found a single set of tracks leading from the barn to the east ridge, and she followed them with a shotgun in her hands. It wasn't trust that made her walk out there. It was instinct. The knowledge that Eli had scars no one asked about, and sometimes men like that disappeared when the past got too close. She found him standing at a wooden cross hammered into the earth, facing west. Snow gathered on his hat. He didn't turn around when he heard her boots. "I didn't bury them with the town," he said. "They didn't belong there." She didn't answer, just stood with him until her fingers went numb. He turned then and asked, "You ever think about going back east?" She shook her head. "No one left to miss me." "You sure?" She turned to face him. "You?" He stared at her like he was trying to remember something. Then he said, "No one. I'd want to find me." They walked back in silence. After that day, he stopped calling her girl. He started calling her by her name, Clara. The days warmed slightly, enough to let her hang laundry without gloves. She caught Eli once watching her from the window, expression unreadable. He turned away quickly, but the next day she found a wrapped package on the table. 2 books, one of poetry, one of law. No note. "I don't read," she said that night, holding them up. "Learn," he replied. One day, a storm broke loose, from the west, loud and wild. Lightning struck a tree near the house, split it in half. The wind slammed the shutters open. Eli didn't panic. He just nailed them shut with a calm that didn't belong to most men. Clara watched him work, sleeves rolled, hands steady. That night, as thunder rolled like war drums across the sky, she found him outside, soaked, arms folded. "You trying to prove something?" she asked. "No, just remembering what fear used. To feel like, find it?" He looked at her, really looked. "No, I think I lost it when I let someone else die for me." The wind pulled at her hair. She stepped forward, rested a hand on his shoulder. Neither moved for a long time. That week, they rode into town together for supplies. People stared. A few whispered. One man spat near her feet and muttered, "Cripple." She didn't react. But Eli did. He walked to the man, stared at him long and hard and said, "Say it again. Say it louder. Say it in front of someone who'll bury you for it." The man backed down. On the ride home, Clara asked, "Would you have done that for anyone?" He replied, "I haven't met anyone else worth the trouble." That night, she slept deeper than she had in years, and when she woke, there was a fire in the hearth, coffee already brewed, and a man sitting outside staring at the ridge like it still owed him an answer he'd never get. She limped out beside him and said, "Maybe it's not about what you're owed." He looked up, surprised. "Maybe it's about who stays when they don't have to." He said nothing, but for the first time he smiled. Slight, brief, but real. The chickens scattered before she reached the barn. Harrow snorted. The air smelled wrong. Cold, sharp, and slick with sweat. Clara froze, boot hovering above the threshold, hand tightening on the handle of the empty bucket she'd meant to fill. Then came the voices, male, loud, slurred. She set the bucket down without a sound and stepped inside. 3 men, 2 young, 1 older. All dusted with saddle grime, eyes glassy, laughter like rusted saw blades. Bottles clinked near their boots. One of them held a lantern. Another had his hand deep in Eli's locked cabinet, the wood splintered from the edge of a crowbar. "She's prettier than I figured," the youngest said, eyeing her up and down. The oldest turned, grinned wide, and stepped toward her, tipping his hat. "Didn't expect company, miss. We're just helping ourselves to what Maddox ain't using no more." Her mouth stayed shut. Her eyes moved toward the saddle rack, then to the far wall where the old rifle rested. The second man spat. "Boss ain't around. Ain't been around in days. Bet he's halfway to Mexico by now." "I think she's his new pet," the younger one said. "He always did have a taste for broken things." The laughter that followed was low and cruel. Clara didn't speak. She walked slow and steady, her limp pronounced but proud. They watched her. She moved past the lantern and toward the workbench. She didn't reach for the hammer. She reached for the rifle. Not fast, not sneaky, just deliberate. The metal felt cold against her palm. The older one squinted. "You know how to use that?" She cocked the lever slowly. The sound sliced the silence in half. "I don't miss," she said. That wasn't entirely true. She'd only fired it twice. Once at a rattler, once at a coyote. Missed the snake, hit the coyote, but it was the way she stood that stopped them. The way her finger rested just outside the trigger. The way her eyes didn't blink. The men shifted. Their bluster bled out like steam from a broken pipe. The second man raised his hands and took a step back. The youngest looked at the older one for guidance. None came. Then hoofbeats. Maddox rode in fast and hard, gun drawn, eyes black with fury. The door slammed open behind her, wind sweeping dust across the floor. The 3 men backed off, raising their hands. Maddox didn't say a word, just aimed. Clara didn't lower her rifle. She didn't need to. "Out," Maddox growled. They left, all 3. No threats, no muttering, just boot heels fading into the dirt. Clara turned toward Maddox. His expression was unreadable. "You freeze?" "No." He looked at the cabinet, then back to her. "You shoot?" "No." "Why not?" She hesitated. "Didn't need to." That night he sat across from her at the table. The fire popped once, sharp and angry. They ate in silence until he said, "You scared?" "I was angry." "Good." Later he brought the rifle to her room, set it against the wall. "You'll need to practice." And she did, every morning before dawn, while the mist still clung to the ground. He didn't praise, didn't scold, just watched, adjusted her stance, corrected her aim with a single word or a nod. By the 4th day, she hit the knot in the fence post every time. Over cornbread and stew that week, he finally asked, "What happened to your leg?" She stirred the pot without meeting his eyes. "Fire, riverboat crash. Wasn't supposed to be on board. My sister snuck me in. We wanted to see the wheel turn." His brow furrowed. "How old?" 7. "Anyone else make it?" "My sister. She died after." smoke in her lungs. I pulled her out. She never woke up. She poured his bowl full, then her own. They ate, in silence again. But something shifted. A weight exchanged. The next day he handed her a second gun, smaller, sleeker. "You're quick," he said. "Keep this one on you." "Are we expecting trouble?" "Always." The land responded to them differently now. Animals stirred less when she passed. People in town whispered less when she rode in beside him. One woman at the general store nodded to her. Clara nodded back. She noticed Eli watching her more. Not in a man's way, not in a lover's way, in a soldier's way, as if he were measuring her resolve like powder in a bullet. Then one evening he brought out a small battered music box, sat it on the porch railing between them. "My boy used to crank this," he said. "Wouldn't go to bed without it." The tune was faint, almost broken, but it played. Clara sat beside him, said nothing. "You remind me of her," he added after a moment. "Your wife?" "No, my boy." She was soft. He was stubborn. She smiled. "I don't know how to be soft," he admitted. "I don't need soft," she replied. They didn't touch. But the air between them felt full, not heavy. Full. The next morning she saddled her horse before he did, checked the cinch twice, rode ahead. He caught up with a smirk. "You planning to leave me behind? Thought you liked quiet." He chuckled once, a rare sound. They found a dead calf near the fence line. Coyotes again. She knelt by it, inspected the tracks. "Not just coyotes," she said. "One of them was limping, dragging a back leg." He raised an eyebrow. "You're not the only one who watches closely," she said. They tracked the den together. He let her lead. That night, she sat at the fire and read aloud from one of the books he'd given her. Her voice was rough but steady. He sat with his eyes closed, just listening. Afterward he asked, "Why'd you agree to come here?" "Mail order." She looked into the flames. "Didn't think anyone else would ask." "Not because of the leg," she shook her head. "Because I wasn't quiet, I asked too many questions. You've hardly spoken since you got here." "Maybe I finally got an answer." She stood, walked to the door, paused, looked back. "I won't be your ghost, Eli." He met her eyes. "I won't make you one." That night, the wind outside didn't howl, the house didn't creak, the nightmares didn't come. For the first time, Clara didn't dream of fire. She dreamed of building something that could stand through one. The sound of hooves was wrong this time. Not Maddox's measured gait or the quiet shuffle of Harrow in the cold morning. These were too fast, too loud, and they didn't stop at the gate. They came straight through it. Clara stepped outside before the dust even settled, rifle in hand, heart beating once for every 3 steps the rider took. Jed Farnell, clean-shaven, dressed better than he had a right to be, pistol low on his hip like it was meant for show. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Well," he said, spitting near her boot, "you clean up all right." She didn't answer, didn't flinch either. "You got comfortable real quick, didn't you?" he said, glancing at the porch, the fence she helped rebuild, the barn they fixed together. "Tell me, Clara, did you take my letter and run straight into his bed?" She raised the rifle slightly. His hand didn't move toward his holster, but his jaw tensed. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I came to claim what's mine. You lost that right at the train station." He stepped forward. She didn't back down. "Now see, that's where you're wrong," he said. "You were bought fair. My name's on that letter. My name's still on a lot of things, including this land." The door creaked behind her. Maddox stepped out slow, no weapon drawn, just eyes that saw too much. "You've got 1 minute to ride out," he said. Jed didn't move. "You're squatting on what ain't yours, Maddox. I've got papers say this stretch was promised to my father before you took it over with blood and fire." "You want to take this to the court?" Maddox said flatly. "Or the grave?" Clara didn't look at either of them. She looked at the way Jed's fingers twitched near his belt, the way his words got quicker when he didn't get his way. "I don't need a judge to know what's mine," Jed said, staring at her now. "And that includes her." Then his hand moved. Fast, but not fast enough. Maddox's fist met his jaw before Clara's trigger finger even twitched. Jed hit the dirt hard, blood smearing his teeth. He staggered up, only to get knocked down again, with a boot to the ribs. Clara stepped back, watching Maddox's fury unleashed like a dam giving way. "Touch her again," Maddox hissed, "and I'll break you in places your daddy forgot to teach you about." Jed gasped, coughed blood, and spat it at the ground. He didn't get back up again. Not that day. By sundown, he was gone. But the damage had already wormed its way in. Clara found the burnt document the next morning, stuffed in the stove behind, kindling. The flames hadn't taken it fully. It was charred but readable. A deed. Old. Faded. Signed by a surveyor long dead. It named Jed Farnell's father as the original claimant to the Northern Tract, land that now bore Maddox's fence lines and Clara's garden beds. She sat with it a long time. When Maddox came in for coffee, she didn't speak at first. Just laid the page on the table. He looked at it, didn't blink. "You lied," she said. He shook his head. "I took what they took from me? That's not the same. They killed my family," he said. "Burned them in their beds, shot my boy while he slept. You want the law's version of justice? It died with them. You buried them on land you stole back, reclaimed. You killed for it." He didn't deny it. "Yes." Her throat tightened. The anger coiled so tight in her chest it made her feel like choking. "And me?" she asked. "What am I?" "Another piece of property you reclaimed from the man who left me." He flinched, not visibly, not in his face, but something in his shoulders sank. "You were never his," he said. She stared at him for a long time. Then she packed her things. He didn't stop her. Not with words, not with hands. He just stood in the doorway as she walked past. Saddlebag slung over her shoulder, coat drawn tight. She didn't look back. The town wasn't kinder than it had been, but it was different now. People didn't whisper with the same sharpness. Maybe it was the way she held herself. Maybe it was because of the gun at her hip. She found work with the school teacher, a widow named Mrs. Green, who took one look at Clara's limp and asked if she could read. Clara nodded once and said, "Better every day." She worked quietly, taught numbers and letters, cleaned slates and stitched books. Nights were the hardest. The bed was softer than the ranch, but colder. The wind didn't knock on the walls like it used to. There were no bootsteps outside, just silence, the kind that didn't watch you breathe. One afternoon, she walked past the jail and the sheriff waved her over. "You still talk to that Maddox fella?" he asked. She shook her head. "That's a shame," he said, scratching his chin. "'Cause he might need someone who believes in him. Something happened out near the ridge." "What happened?" "Jed Farnell's dead, shot clean through, bullet in the back. Found him face down near the riverbed 3 miles past Maddox's line." The room spun slightly. "I don't think it was Maddox," the sheriff added, slow. "But you knew both men. That makes your word matter." She wanted to speak. Couldn't. Just nodded. Later that night, she opened her satchel for the first time since leaving the ranch. Inside, tucked beneath a worn scarf, was an envelope. No name on it. Just folded clean. The letter was short. "Clara, you were the only thing I didn't take by force, and the only one I'd never tried to keep. If you hear I've vanished, no, I didn't run. I just got tired of waiting for justice to feel like something other than fire. E." She didn't cry. She folded the letter and lit the lamp. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel cold. Not because the room was warm, but because now she knew the truth hadn't left her. It had waited, just long enough for her to see it plain. The world had gone quiet by the time she settled into the rhythm of her new life. Chalk dust on her fingers, the laughter of children in her ears, and the creak of a schoolhouse door that didn't scream like Maddox's ever did. Clara kept her head down, wrote slow on the board, corrected letters with patience. She no longer limped with shame. The brace still clanked, but it didn't whisper failure anymore. People called her Miss Whitmore now. Not cripple, not bride. Just her name. She told stories to the little ones about stars and rivers and prairie winds, but not about fire, not about blood. Some things belonged to silence, even when they pressed her with questions about the scar on her arm or why she always carried that revolver tucked under her coat. She smiled and told them, "It's for snakes, the two-legged kind." No one laughed. They just understood. Then one morning the sheriff rode up. His horse kicked up dust as he tied it to the post and walked inside without knocking. His eyes were tight, his voice even tighter. "He's gone." She didn't ask who. The way her stomach dropped told her enough. They found a trail of blood near the cliffs. Looked like he'd been holed up in some old mining shaft, left behind a bedroll, some empty cans, and this. He pulled a small book from his coat. Ledger. Names, dates, notes. Seems like Maddox was tracking more than land claims. He had a list. Her mouth dried. Jed Farnell's name was on it. So were 5 others. All dead. All buried quiet. She took the book from him. The pages were worn. Some smeared. Others burned at the edges. But the list was clear. Dates beside each name, crossed out in red. Final entry didn't have a name. Just a note. The one who lit the match lives in the mirror. The sheriff didn't say much else. Just tipped his hat and left her alone with it. She closed the school early that day. The children didn't argue. They just watched her the way kids do when they sense grown-up sadness no one will explain. That night, she sat at her desk, staring at the ledger. Maddox had hunted them. Every man connected to the fire that gutted his family. And he'd done it while pretending he was rebuilding something instead of setting new fires in the shadows. He hadn't lied about vengeance. He'd just kept its depth buried under calloused hands and quiet eyes. She thought about the dance they never had, the kiss they never shared, the way his hand hovered near hers when she passed him coffee but never touched. Like he thought he'd burn her just by wanting. The next day, word reached town that a stranger had come looking for her at the livery. Didn't give a name. Just asked for the woman who limped like thunder rolled through her leg. She kept the pistol loaded that night, but no one came. Weeks passed. The sheriff visited again, this time quieter. Still no sign of him. It's like he disappeared off the face of the map. Clara didn't answer, just stared out the window. She'd stopped wearing her old coat, took to a cleaner one. Still carried the revolver, still taught the kids, but every time a rider passed near the edge of town, she turned slightly, just in case. Then a letter arrived, folded once, sealed with wax, no stamp. She opened it alone. "You don't have to forgive me. I never asked for that. But if you ever wonder whether it was all just death and dust, know that the only time I stopped running was when you looked at me like I wasn't a monster. I wanted to build a fence, Clara. Not to keep you in, but to keep the world out. You deserved better than a man like me, and I still dream of your voice when the wind shakes the boards." She read it twice, then she burned it. Not out of hate, not even sorrow, but because keeping it felt like waiting. And she'd spent too long waiting for men who couldn't stay. The following week, a man from out east came through town looking to purchase land. He asked Clara to help translate some deeds, said she seemed smart, measured, said she had the look of someone who's been through fire and didn't fall apart. She helped him, got paid, bought better shoes, taught longer hours, slept easier. But she never filled the second chair at her table. Not again, until spring. The creek thawed. The grass returned in cautious shades. A horse trotted down Main Street, one she recognized. The man in the saddle was thinner than she remembered, limped worse, beard grown out, hat pulled low, but it was him. He dismounted slowly, walked up the steps like his legs weren't quite his anymore, and stopped just short of the door. She didn't rush to greet him, didn't cry. Just opened the door and waited. "I didn't do it," he said. "Didn't kill Farnell." She nodded once. "I know. They would have buried me anyway. They still might." He looked older, not in his face, but in his bones. "I'm tired, Clara." "Good. I've got nothing left." She stepped aside. "That's not true," she said. That night he sat at her table, drank from her cup, and said nothing else. And she didn't need him to. Because sometimes true love isn't in the words, it's in who walks through the door and who leaves it open. The child was the first to spot him, a boy no older than 7, pointed from the far end of the field, eyes wide as the stranger limped through the morning fog like a man carved from old wood and darker days. Clara didn't look up right away. She was busy marking the last spelling paper, red ink drying into the shape of a check. But the hush that fell over the children made her glance toward the window. And when she saw the figure by the tree line, her fingers froze. It had been nearly a year. No letters, no rumors, no sightings. The trail had gone cold and she let it. Buried him where he wanted to stay buried. In silence. In memory. In the parts of her that only spoke at night when no one was listening. But there he was. Slower. Gaunter. His coat too thin for the season, his hat lower than she remembered. A scar curved across his cheek now, fresh and pink. His eyes searched the yard like a man stepping back into a place he never thought he'd be allowed again. He didn't wave, didn't call her name. He waited. She dismissed the children with a nod, no bell, no words. They scattered in the way children do when they know something grown is happening but can't name it. Clara stepped out and closed the door behind her. She didn't hurry. Her limp was still there, always would be. But it carried no shame. The brace had been replaced with one made by a local smith, stronger, tighter fitted. She wore a darker coat now, hands rougher than before, eyes sharper. When she reached him. They just stood in the dust. "I thought you were dead," she said. "I thought I wanted to be," Eli answered. He didn't explain where he'd been. Didn't tell her about the bullet that tore through his ribs or the fever that nearly took him in a border town shack. He didn't need to. She could see it in his walk. In the way his hand occasionally pressed to his side like the wound still ached. "I buried the past," he said after a moment. "What was left of it?" She tilted her head. "And what did you find under it?" "Shame. And your name." That almost broke her, but she didn't let it show. "You said you didn't want to be kept," he added. "I still don't." "Then I won't keep you. But I'll walk beside you if that's something you want." She looked past him. The hills hadn't changed. The wind still carried the same dirt and heat. But something felt different. Lighter. Like the weight had shifted without her realizing it. "You still carry that ledger?" she asked. He reached into his coat and pulled out the battered book. It was tied with string now, corners bent and water-stained. He handed it to her. She opened it. The names were all still there, crossed out, all but one. The last entry was no longer a line. It was her name, not scratched out, not underlined. Just there, written in cleaner ink than the rest. No date. "No note. You left me alive," she said. "I didn't want revenge to be the last thing I remembered about this world." She handed it back. "Then burn it." He blinked. "What?" "You came here to bury ghosts. That book's one of them." He hesitated. Then he took it, pulled a match from his coat, and lit it. They watched together as it curled and blackened in the dirt. He stayed that night, sleeping on the porch without asking. She left him a blanket but didn't speak. When she woke, he was still there, boots off, gun tucked beneath his coat, hands folded across his chest like a man waiting to be judged. She brewed 2 cups of coffee and set one on the porch rail. He sat beside her. Neither spoke. Then, quietly, she asked, "What now?" "I rebuild. Here, if you'll have me." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled a folded paper from her pocket. A deed, fresh ink, a small piece of land just south of the schoolhouse, untilled, undeveloped, empty. "I bought it 2 months ago," she said. "Didn't know why." He looked at her. "I do." They didn't speak of love, not directly, not in big, trembling words. Instead, they rebuilt, together, boards replaced, fences mended, garden planted, children from the school helped carry stones. Locals whispered at first, then they waved. Some even brought pie. Clara and Eli didn't kiss in public, didn't say things that could be repeated. But at night, 2 lamps would burn in 2 different windows, facing each other, flickering across the small stretch of dirt between their homes. One evening, she found a wooden swing built between 2 posts, strung with thick rope, the seat wide, enough for 2. A small carving on the armrest read, "Not what we lost, what we make now." He didn't ask her to sit, she just did, and that was enough. Years later, when storms came through and the creek swelled, their house stood firm. Kids still learned their letters from Miss Whitmore. A new sign read, "Whitmore and Maddox School for Frontier Girls," carved by hand, nailed straight, no ceremony. And sometimes, late in the evening, folks passing through would swear they saw a man with a scar on his face, sitting outside the schoolhouse, head tipped toward a woman with a brace on her leg, both laughing like thunder had never touched either of them. No one dared ask how they got there, because everyone could see. They had walked back, together, without being saved.